How is intuition different from the inner chatter?
You suffer from the conversations that you have in your head. I think what I've learned is that everybody suffers from it, powerful or not. It's the same thing about the way we put junk food into our body. It's the same thing in our mind. Like when we listen to junk, when we listen to other people's negativity, when we listen to our own negativity, that's junk.
You have to acknowledge your shortcomings. Absolutely. You have to understand who you are. I mean, you should do that self-work anyway before you even think about accountability.
How easy or difficult is it? You're totally sucked into your emotions and you can't see the feedback that you're getting from the universe or from other people.
And we all have a past, and we all bring that with us every day.
Whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or not. I want people to just start recognizing the patterns that you have in your brain, right? That's the first step.
Let's say there is a continuum. On one hand of continuum, there is accountability. What would be on the other side?
If somebody uses accountability just because they want to go after someone, but they don't use the same metrics and the same system for someone else, right? If it's not a fair thing, if it's a punitive thing, then accountability doesn't work.
Rhett, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you here.
Well, look, I love chatting with you. It's always fun, and so it's good to be on with you.
Always a pleasure. And I'm super excited because today the subject that we are going to dive into, I have dealt with that. I have suffered with that. And I'm sure everyone who's going to listen to this conversation is going to get immense value from this. So super excited. You know, one of the key things that you have always spoken about, you have written, you have evangelized is the importance of dealing with that inner voice. The voice in our head that can either make us or break us. One of the challenges that I personally feel is that I'm not being able to even create a distinction that if it's the voice that I'm listening to, and I get so much sucked into that, and then only once the destruction has been done, the damage has been done, only then I wake up. Shucks, man, it has happened. Most of us are not even aware of that inner voice. How did you create that distinction? How did you build that awareness that, hey, this is an inner voice, and let me be more mindful?
What a great question, right? And gosh, I could take that in so many different ways. And so I'll try to be concise because I know we want to give people, some things to take away today. Look, we all, like you said, we all deal with it. And in fact, when we were trying to figure out who the audience was for this book, it was really, really hard to narrow it down because everybody suffers from this. And it impacts everyone. I don't care if you're the president of the United States or the president or prime minister of India or the person sweeping the floors. You suffer from the conversations that you have in your head. Benefit. Let me put it that way too. You benefit or you suffer.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, there were a couple sort of big moments in my life where I always thought it was my gut talking. I always thought it was we hear that. I don't know if you have that expression in India, but we have this expression in the US, like you listen to your gut. I don't know if there's an equivalent there.
Yeah.
But what that means is you listen to that intuition, right? You listen to that inner voice when you make a decision, because usually it's right. And I learned early in my career when I felt that instinct that it was time to make a change or there was something I needed to do something. When I listened to that intuition or that gut feeling, what I now know as my inner voice up here, I made good decisions. When
Mm.
I didn't listen to it, things went badly.
Yeah.
And so I learned to recognize it because I always talk about I learned a lot by quitting things, and I quit a bunch of jobs that people thought I was crazy for quitting to move
Mm.
on to the next thing. And when I didn't listen to that feeling or that voice in my head, I was miserable.
Mm.
And when I listened to it, I was a lot happier. I was a lot more
Mm.
fulfilled. So I started to draw that correlation and really start listening to that, even on a day-to-day basis, because we do a lot of self-talk every
Mm.
day. This impacts our mood, impacts how our day goes, how we talk to other people, how we act. And so we all do this. We let other people sometimes impact how we talk to ourselves. And I equate it to things I don't know about you, but it's easy to sit on front of the television and eat a bunch of junk food, right? Right. It's easy to get those chips and those and that and the thing at night and eat those as we watch TV. It's the same thing about the way we put junk food into our body. It's the
Mm.
same thing in our mind. Like when we listen to junk, when we listen to other people's negativity, when we listen to our own negativity, that's junk, and that's not productive for us.
Yeah. You spoke about two things. You spoke about intuition and you spoke about that inner chatter. How would you define intuition and the inner chatter, and how is intuition different from the inner chatter?
Wow, I am not a philosopher. I don't know if I distinguish
Mm.
uh, between the two. I do think that they're interconnected. There definitely is
Mm.
an intuition, but to me, it's really so interconnected to that inner
Mm.
voice,
Mm.
right? I think that inner voice just gives it life. It gives
Mm.
it a voice. It gives it words, right? The intuition for us is is that primal, I think maybe it's that primal, that early instinct that we have. But I do think they're all both connected. And I'm not a scientist and I'm not a
Yeah.
philosopher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't proclaim that, and those are really beautiful, eloquent words. But what I know simply is this, that we all have this instinct in our is right here, and then we have it up here, and they're interconnected.
Mm.
And if we feed positivity, and we feed, or if we feed negativity, it impacts us, how we perform, how we feel,
Mm.
how we relate to other people, I think it actually, in the big picture, it impacts our success or our failure.
So help me understand, Rhett, when we talk about that it's important to silence the inner chatter so that you can enhance your performance. In that case, the moment I'm muting that inner voice, wouldn't it have the impact on my intuition as well? And if yes, what should be done? If no, why not?
Yeah, I don't think we silence it,
Mm.
because I don't think we can silence it, number one.
Mm.
And
Mm.
number two, I don't think it's healthy to silence it, because I do
Mm.
think of that interconnectedness, right?
Mm.
I
Mm.
think what the point is to reframe things. So I did a
Mm.
post yesterday about the questions that we ask ourselves.
Yeah.
So, when somebody wants to start a business, if somebody wants to do something that is scary, you know, then what we often ask ourselves, well, what if it fails? Right? Why do we not ask ourselves, what if it succeeds?
Yeah. The quality of the
That's the
question.
that's the right question. And so the right question is, what if it succeeds? Then I get to live out my dream. I get to fulfill
Mm.
my life in a way that I want to fulfill it. If we ask ourselves, what if it fails? We're framing it in a negative way. So what I'm talking about in this book is about how we reframe these questions, right? That we ask ourselves, because we often ask them in a negative way. I
Mm.
think we should be asking them in the positive, right?
Mm.
Not fear based, because the question is, what if it fails? That's based on fear. It's not based on joy and success. It's not based on looking forward to being and succeeding in what you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
just asking. We often ask questions in the wrong
Mm.
way. We frame them in the wrong way.
So what I'm picking right now, Rhett, is it's not about muting or silencing the inner chatter. It's about being mindful of your inner chatter and shifting the focus as soon as possible. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, it's about, and I have the the 4S model, right? I call it the 4S magic, and it's spot it. So you spot when you're spiraling. We all know when we're putting mental junk food in our brain, right? We know that when we're spiraling and we're acting out of fear. So this is about spotting that. Then the second part of that is space, creating the space to examine the evidence. And what do I mean by that? So if we're making the decision, we often are doing it with some information. We're doing it with some evidence. We're trying to make the best decision we can make. So why aren't we asking ourselves, we've done our homework. We know that this is a good decision. Yes, there's some possible negative outcomes, but we've tried to make the best decision possible. So this is about creating that space and examining the evidence in your brain. It says, okay, this isn't so bad, right? And then the next part of that is short circuiting that, stopping the negative, like severing, like pulling the plug out of the wall, right? Like you're going to short circuit those negative feelings. And then you're going to switch. The fourth S is you switch it from that negative to that positive, because you start asking yourselves, instead of what if it fails, well, what if it succeeds? And then all this happens, right? You start thinking about, instead of going back and saying, well, if this happens, then this is going to happen. Then I'm going to declare bankruptcy. And then, for example, I was talking to my son yesterday, and I did this with him. It was great. He was, I can't even remember the question, but it was, well, Dad, if I do that, then I'm going to get in trouble here, and I'm going to do this, and then this will happen. And I said, time out. There are a bunch of what ifs in that question. There are a bunch of negative what ifs in that question. If you do this internship and you succeed at it, then there might be a great job offer at the end of that. Why are you worrying about a failing at this internship when you should be thinking about it?
Yeah.
What if you succeed?
Yeah.
Then you're setting yourself up for success. So there's, we often because of fear, we're scared to take this chance. So you've got to switch that. And that's when I talk about reframing the question, right? That's when you reframe it to, what if something really great happens?
So it's spot it, space, and examine, look for the evidences, short circuit, and switch. Is my understanding right? I know the power is in your name as well. So that's the reason you can talk about short circuits. Just wondering, how easy or difficult is it when the amygdala hijack has happened? You're totally sucked into your emotions and you can't see the feedback that you're getting from the universe or from other people. How do you take a pause in that?
I don't proclaim that this is easy, right? This takes work, and it takes a lot of self-work, and it takes
amount of practice.
Yeah. Look, I'm not trying to say this is, that this kind of thing is easy. What I really want you to take away from this new book that's coming out is that you start winning by recognizing, the spot is almost the most important thing. Because if you don't learn to spot it and learn to stop and create that space so that you can rethink and reframe, you're going to have a really hard time. So I want people to just start recognizing the patterns that you have in your brain, right? That's the first step, and that's the most important step. And in that is a lot of power if you can do that. But this isn't easy. It takes a lot of self-work, and a lot of times, I tell you, really what helps me is to have an account. And we're going to talk about accountability in another episode. But having a partner, a person that you trust and that you are close to help you do this process is immensely helpful.
So it's like making sure that regularly you are practicing and reflecting on your actions. What could be done differently? But I think you actually spotted it really well. You were spot on when you said that, winning by recognizing it. Because
Yeah.
most of the time, we are not being able to recognize that I've been hijacked now. Yeah. And I'm wondering, would it be easy for me even if I'm able to spot it? Because at times I personally feel that as human beings, right, we get addicted to suffering as well. That's what I believe in, because there's a payoff for everything that we do or we don't do. Having said that, let's take one step forward. Personally, I've come across senior leaders, and you do a lot of work with C-suite executives. I often hear them talking about that how they might not be able to deliver on the promise, how they have their own self-doubts, how they have their own fear of failure or fear of success. How do they show up in people, and how can we help them in helping them build their personal capacities when they are dealing with this kind of internal conversation, the inner chatter?
That's a great question. And I do a lot of this in my coaching. And it was one of the reasons behind the book is, it became very apparent to me in the coaching that I do that this is a big problem that kind of shocked me. I always thought that you have this perception that successful people have it all together and they must not have any doubt. They must be really confident. They must be, but that's what I said when we opened the program, which is I've talked to presidents of countries who have doubt about what they say and what they do and how they act and what they're doing. And so I think what I've learned is that everybody suffers from it, powerful or not. And then in my coaching, I think one of the things that we really talk a lot about with most clients is we get into their thought process, we get into their thinking, we really dig deep into their background, their history. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client a couple of months ago, and he called, and I worked with him a few years ago, and he called me back and he said, I appreciate the work we did before, and I've got a problem. I'm angry and I'm upset lately, and I don't know why. And I'm anxious. I said, all right, well, let's start talking. And so it took us about a month. And what we dug into was that he was being triggered by a person in his office that reminded him of his mother. And he didn't really make that connection, but the anxiety and the stuff that he was feeling and the self-talk that he was having about this person and about her work and stuff, it was a trigger and a reaction to his relationship with his mother. And he didn't really make that connection. He didn't really recognize the self-talk that he was having about the way he was treating her, the way he was talking to her, the way he reacted to her. And so I think, bring it back down to your question, is the way it manifests itself is in the way that they treat people, the way that they talk to people, the way that they show up. And we talk about presence, and we talk about showing how people show up. It often manifests itself in the way people show up and the way they and so when it does that, when you're self-talk and when you're subconscious and when things that from your past, and we all have a past, and we all bring that with us every day,
whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or not. And so that's how it shows up. And so that's when, that's a particular instance where it was a problem. And it's not always a problem, but it often does get in people's way. And so we have to deal with it. We have to talk about it. And we have to ask a lot of questions. I just ask a lot of questions about their inner dialogue. And I make them think about it, because we don't think about it very often. And like we talked about, it's about asking them the question about their inner dialogue. And when they start analyzing it, you can actually get someplace with the.
Rhett, how do you ensure that your inner chatter, your past is not coming in the way while you are talking to other people or while you are coaching people, these C-suite executives? it must be very difficult. It's like making sure that the guard is always on, who is watching, and ensuring that only these people are allowed to enter through this door. And these people, no man, let me be a traffic cop.
Yeah, 100%. There are a couple of things that you have to do. I think number one, then I have a daily meditation practice, and I have a daily practice of asking myself questions, and I do that. And my questions are, am I living? Am I showing up the best way that I can show up today? I dig into. I sort of do some self work every day to make sure that that my mindset is in the right fashion. The other thing is it's who you're with and people that you're around and the people that you associate with. That matters. It matters a lot. And if you have negative people in your life, then you're going to most likely have negative talk. When I went on my entrepreneurial journey and left the government and left really good jobs, I had to make sure that I had the right people in my life. If I'd have been around my parents or some of my friends who thought I was absolutely crazy, and if I had listened to that all the time, then I never would have taken those chances. I never would have taken those opportunities. And so I think we also have to be very aware of who we are around, and do we have a support network of people that are positive in our lives. So I think it takes self-work. I think it takes who you associate with and who you network with. And I think those are two really critical factors.
I love it when you said that you do meditation, you do self-work, and you ensure who you are around with. How does meditation help you to keep a check on your inner chatter? I know it's a very silly, very cliched question, very simple question, but I would genuinely want to understand that so that I can learn it, and people who are listening, I'm sure there would be people who might be new to meditation.
To me, it's the most important part of that is it's quiet time and it's peace time to sort of let go and just be in a moment and be very present with my body and my mind, and there's not a lot of thinking going on. The thinking goes on when I finish and I can sit down and I can think about my day and my attitude and and to me, sometimes meditation can be on a busy street. It can be just sitting there for 5 minutes and sort of letting all the things in my brain go and not shutting down, but just being present in the moment and listening to my brain and to my soul and so I don't know if I do it right, but I do know that for me it's a time to get set, to kind of get ready for the day, and to get in the right frame of mind and get everything out from the night and from the day before and kind of hit a reset button. For me, then it's about asking the questions, how I want to take the day on, how I want to, and just being very aware and being very present and not this is I know I'm rambling, and so people aren't really understanding it, but to me it's just making space. I'll say this: it's about making space in your day, in your morning. I do it in the morning, and at night I ask myself the questions. But in the morning, I just take 5 to 10 minutes where I tune everything else out, and I get my head right for the day. And I think that's really, really important. To tune everything out. The kids running around, the noise and the traffic and everything that's going on in the world, and just stopping and closing your eyes and just connecting, getting connected.
Yeah. Isn't it beautiful, Rhett, that irrespective of who I speak with, be it a senior manager in an organization, be it an entrepreneur, be it an executive coach, be it a C-suite executive working in one of the MNCs, one of the things that everyone talk about is being aware. And bringing self back in this moment. And yet there's so much running around. We all are running around. There's something as if we all are chasing something and we're not being able to identify that.
You know what the question is then? If you then I think the question is then you say to yourself, why do I feel this way? I mean, we don't ask ourselves that often enough. Like, why am I upset when you said that? Like, I don't know if that was an answer to what you were getting ready to say, but I feel like that's a key thing is like we don't take the time and say, hold on, Rhett, why did I react that way to that?
Mm, mm.
Why do I feel that way?
And this is exactly the space and the examining of the evidence you were speaking about, that it's important to make space in this moment and examine, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? What's that unmet need? What's the fear that I've been dealing with? Which value has been compromised in this moment? And these are quite investigating questions. Pure gold.
They are, I think, and I think against Marshall Goldsmith says all the time, it's simple but hard. We've got to want to feel better. We've got to want to feel better about ourselves, our decisions, and how we act, and how we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Like you said before, which I think was really, really brilliant, which is some people just like feeling like this.
Yeah.
They like feeling. They want to live in that negativity. They want to live in that, and that's I think that's a different problem, and that's probably somebody that needs some therapy and some other help. But I think for most of us, we can live in more positive space. We can have more control over the way we think and feel.
So let's shift gears, Rhett. Another topic that you often talk about, and that's the name of the company that you run. It's known as Accountability Inc. When was that moment when you realized that accountability is important and that's the missing link in organizations, in communities, in nations, in relationships? What was that moment when you realized that?
It goes back to goes back to sort of my personal experience too, and there are a couple things I've realized is that when I had companies, so my first company, we started during the last big recession in 2007, 8, 9, and being a startup in those times, it taught us to be very lean. It taught us to be very focused on our money and on our budget and on our product, on our services, and everything. Because we didn't have the access to capital, we would have in better times. And even when we had a $4 or $5 million EBITDA, we couldn't get any money. We couldn't get a loan. We were running really well. We were growing like 1,300% a year, yet there wasn't a bank in the world that would touch us at the time because of the economy and because of the recession. And so I realized at that time that we were a very highly accountable organization, and it really served us well. Like, we had really good accountability processes. Everybody on the team had a mission. They knew exactly what their jobs were and how their success tied into the company's success. And once we sold that, I was involved in another company, and we were all over the place. And that company failed miserably. And so, I just sort of sat back and I looked at that. I said, well, how could we have been really, really successful in a recession and actually had a really good exit and grew it to a $50 million company and had a really good exit? And then this other company, which had more talented people, it had a better product. How could we fail? And it simply came down to that we had really tight processes. We had really tight management. We had really tight. We were accountable. We were a highly accountable organization. The other one wasn't. The other
Yeah,
one just simply wasn't.
yeah.
We had
So,
money, and so we didn't pay attention to the small stuff.
so what are the components of accountability in an organization?
The components I think are number one, it's a values and a values driven organization. I think it is highly focused on um, having good, clear objectives and ways that, under a clear understanding of the objectives, a clear understanding of where the company is going, and then it has a very clear people in the organization. I'll give you an example. So Gallup has done some great research around the workplace, and 50% of our managers globally don't understand what their role is. They don't understand what their job is. They don't understand what their objective.
I'm not surprised.
And so it's actually having your team. And then there's another, the disengaged, like I think, was it 75% of our employees are unengaged, are highly unengaged in their work, which is a really scary number if you ask me. So it's having a management team that understands the objectives. It's the workforce that understands their objectives, and everybody in the organization knowing what's expected of them, and having clear goals and a clear way for them to get to their objectives. It's also an organization that has opportunity that people, if they know that they meet their objectives, that they're going to get rewarded for that, and there's a chance to move up in the organization, a chance to perform at another level. It's also an organization that is highly engaged. It means that they know that the management cares for them, appreciates them, listens to them, is providing a safe space to work, and also is cares about them. So we don't often do all of that very well, but the companies that get a lot of that right, they're the companies that grow, they're the companies that last, and they're the companies that are highly innovative, and you see they're disrupting industries.
Yeah. It sounds very easy, but I think it's a Herculean task when we are talking about value-driven organization. Objectives should be clear. You mentioned that 50% of the managers, they're not even clear about their objectives and the goals that they're supposed to deliver. And 75% are disengaged. So getting that engagement itself is a Herculean task. Help me understand. Let's say there's a continuum. On one hand of continuum, there is accountability. What would be on the other side?
I think that's a great question. I think on the other end of that is status quo. I think here's another statistic that really blows my mind. Companies used to be on the Fortune 500 list for 75 years. The average now is 11. So that means that you've got these big companies like the IBMs of the world, the Apples of the world, right? The biggest companies in the world. And almost half of those companies in the next 11 years are probably going to go away. That means that they don't move quickly. They're not innovative. It means that they're not changing with the times. It means that their workforce is disengaged. The only reason you go away if you've made it on that list is that you stopped paying attention. You stopped being what got you there in the first place. And again, I mentioned Marshall again. What got you here won't get you there is so appropriate of a statement, because if you're not continually looking and changing and evolving, you're not going to continue to exist in this market. I guarantee somebody is coming for you. Somebody is looking at your business model. We can do that better. We can do it more efficiently. We can provide better customer service. So if you're not thinking like that, if you're not thinking that somebody's coming for you, you're crazy.
Especially if you look at Rhett, the world that we are living in, the post-pandemic world, the world where we are talking about AI, where we are talking about changes, the fractured world that we have been living in, where moonlighting is happening. What do you think? How can we build a culture of accountability where on one hand, people are talking about moonlighting.
I think you have to, you're not going to stop that, number one. But number two, I think let's face it, leadership is harder today, right? It is so much harder to be a CEO today than it ever has been. I think the data and the just talking to CEOs, in my mind, I think it's so much harder. There's so many more variables that you have to pay attention to. And like you said, you've got people who are doing side hustles, right? And you've also got people who aren't going to be there more than a couple of years.
Yeah.
There's no, people don't stay in companies 40 years like my father did anymore, right? That just doesn't happen. And so you're going to have this constant evolving workforce, right? So I think leadership is really, really hard. Let me just say that. How do you stop? I think what we have to do though is I think accountability is one of those things where if you create a company that people love to be in and they love to work for and that is fair, and I think accountability gets a bad rap because when I say the word accountability, people get kind of anxious because we use accountability in terms of being a fearful thing. When somebody says to you, you're accountable for that, there's a fear to that. There's a fear, it's fear-based, right? Because it means you didn't do something you were supposed to do. It means you failed at something you were supposed to accomplish. And I think that's the wrong way, again, to frame it. We're talking a lot about framing things today. I think accountability is a positive, and I think it creates a fair, when everybody's accountable in the organization, it creates a fairness.
Yeah.
It creates an organization where people know that there's an even playing field and then the favorites don't get. And I had somebody come to me the other day and they've been using our system for about a year. And she said, we don't have to do evaluations anymore. We don't have to do yearly evaluations because we're doing the accountability stuff every week. We know who's performing and who's not performing. And we also know who to promote and who not to promote anymore. We know who to give bonuses to and who is just a favorite, who used to be a favorite, who would get a bonus because they were a favorite. Now the person that's actually performing is getting that bonus. And so it's made it a much more fair organization where people say, you know what, if I come there and I do a really good job, I'm going to get rewarded for that. Not just because the guy next to me is the favorite, so I think if we work really hard as leaders to create those types of organizations and we create those types of places where they know what's expected of them, they know what their contribution is to the organization and to the big goals, to the big objectives, then I don't think we have to worry about people moonlighting. We don't have to worry about people looking for other jobs because we will have created a place that's great to be. And that's to me, people will stay for less money if it's a great place to be.
I hear you, Rhett. That's how it should be done. In fact, in my recent conversation with one of the very senior leaders from Microsoft, the lady said that, Gaurav, I am finding it a bit difficult to find a median, that how much should I hold people accountable? Because the moment I hold people accountable, they think that I am unnecessarily after their life. And it's like walking on a tightrope, how much to push and how much to pull. In your experience, Rhett, where should a senior leader draw the line? That on one hand, I'm holding you accountable. It should not come across as if I'm after your life.
That's a great question. And I think a very important one, because, what we talk about and what we do is we have an accountability system and it's a management system and it's a process oriented thing. So when companies ask, how do they make their organization accountable? We give them this system. And the reason we give them this system is so that because of your very question. Because if you use accountability just because they want to go after someone, but they don't use the same metrics and the same system for someone else, right? If it's not a fair thing, if it's a punitive thing, then accountability doesn't work because
Mm.
it's not the manager is, or this, the leader is essentially just distributing justice, or they're making decisions based on their favorites and on their people they like and the people they don't like. So in order for accountability to work, I think it has to be written down and it has to be visible for everybody to see. So um, in that leader's case,
Mm.
if she doesn't have something that's very visible for everybody to see, and she can't apply equally across the board to everybody, it's not going to seem fair. And you have to answer why. It doesn't
Mm.
mean you don't have to answer why. You still have to answer the question why you haven't reached
Mm.
those goals. But I think that's a fair way to do it, as opposed to just trying to manage this sort of arbitrary line that you don't know what that line is, pushing one way or pulling the other.
Yeah. And it's becoming more and more important, I think, Rhett, as you mentioned, to put together a system, because in the multi-generational cultures that we are a part of, where 4 or 5 generations are working together, how would you hold that person accountable when they are 2 generations apart? Because my communication style is very different from the one who's coming from another generation. Rhett, you write on diverse topics. I was just visiting your articles on Forbes magazine. There's so much that you have written about. Just wondering, what's the impact that generative AI is going to bring on today's leadership style? And what does a CEO need to be mindful of?
We just don't know, right? The fact is, AI has been around for a long time. We've been using it in our daily lives, and we just didn't really think much about it because Chat GPT is getting all the attention. Generative AI is getting all the attention right now because it's made this explosion onto our consciousness in our daily lives. But we've been using AI for a really long time, and just about everything we do every day, whether you're talking to Siri or Google or whatever. So a chat bot that's on customer service. So is it going to change? Absolutely. I don't have a lot of fear that everybody else has about it. I think it's going to make our daily lives easier, but it's not going to make decisions for us. Is it going to impact jobs? Absolutely. Is it going to impact the workforce? Absolutely. I don't think it's going to make us all unemployed, because again, a human has to make that decision. AI is just going to give you the data to do it, right? Now, I think here's where I think is really interesting, and maybe it gets to the root of your question. In terms of CEOs and how we prepare for it, I think if you're not thinking about how to use it in your business and how to apply it for better data, better content, and better information, then you're going to get disrupted. I do think that if you're not being innovative and thinking about how you can use it and how you can use the data that it can give you to better your business, to make moves in your business that you can make, then I think you're going to get disrupted, because I do think it is going to give access to data.
Yeah.
This is going to equal the playing field and give us access now, and then the ability to analyze data that we've never before been able to do. And I think that's really great for businesses who are trying to grow and scale and take on a bigger competitor. If you're not thinking about it as a CEO, then you're probably not going to last as a CEO.
Because, as a CEO, I think, as you mentioned, it's important to prepare, adapt, and lead change. And I think the change that we all are going through right now, unless I prepare for that, unless I adapt, unless I lead, I'll be left behind.
That is a beautiful way to put it.
So, Rhett, what are you curious about now? What is the next article that I can expect on Forbes magazine from you? What's the next book that I can expect from you?
Well, the self-talk is our next book, and it's I think the title is going to be, we're working on the title now, but something about the monster in your mind, because it is kind of a monster. And that self-talk book will come out at the end of the year. We're really excited about that. And the next article in Forbes, I have no idea. Whatever inspiration, I'll write another one next week. I just published one this week.
Thank you so much, Rhett. What a pleasure it was having a conversation with you love the clarity that you've been able to offer to us and provide us on self-talk, the inner conversations, on accountability. And if we don't have accountability in the system, we are actually watering the status quo. And we know the destruction, the damage that it can cause to an organization, the damage that it can cause to a community, society, and the nation. We have seen that in the world.
Well, thank you so much. And if the audience wants to learn more about accountability and how they can use it in their business and what a good accountability system looks like, I'm happy to talk to people. And thank you for the time today. Thank you.
Looking forward.